He found her near the river bank, curled into herself like a dying animal. Mud painted her bare legs and blood threaded down her temple in drying ropes. A thin cotton dress hung from her shoulders, torn in two places, the cloth wet from where she'd crossed the current or maybe from where she'd been thrown in. Her hands were cut. There was a bruise on her neck the size of a man's palm. Jonah didn't ask who had hurt her. He didn't have to. That stretch of frontier, east of the Llano, west of Fort Belknap, was full of rough men who called themselves settlers, traders, scouts. Some were just killers in coats. He dismounted slow, holding his palms out. She did not move. Her eyes followed him, black and glinting. Snake eyes, he thought, but not cold, not dead either. There was something behind them, and he couldn't yet tell if it was fire or fear. He laid his rifle on the dirt and reached for the canteen. She flinched when he stepped close, but didn't run. When he offered the water, she stared at it, then at him. She took it with both hands, trembling hard enough to splash. "You can stay in the barn," he said. "You'll be safe there tonight." He didn't expect her to understand. Her cheek twitched like she might spit or cry, but she did neither, just nodded once. Jonah carried her to the horse, wrapped her in the old cavalry blanket he kept behind the saddle, and rode back up the ridge to his homestead. 4 walls of chinked timber and a barn built more for the mule than for guests. He'd lived there 7 years since the war, alone. 2 graves behind the house told why. She didn't speak a word as he settled her in the hayloft. He lit a lantern and left bread and jerky on a cloth beside her. He didn't ask her name. It wasn't his place. He returned to the house and bolted the door out of habit, though he felt no fear of her. The night passed silent as dirt. In the morning, everything changed. He was chopping wood behind the cabin when the wind shifted. The birds had gone still, the kind of stillness that made the hairs on the neck rise like lightning was coming. He turned toward the ridge and saw the dust first, broad, low, and fast. A war party. He counted quick, too many to guess exact, but more than 50, closer to 80. They rode in double file, bare-chested, feathers in their braids, spears glinting. The sun caught on rifle barrels and the copper studs in their bridles. The horses moved as one. It was the kind of thing soldiers talked about with a tremble in their voice and whiskey in their gut. Jonah didn't run. There was nowhere to run to. He laid down the axe and stepped to the front of the cabin with his hands visible. He didn't reach for the rifle inside. Suicide if he did. The Comanche riders split as they approached, some wheeling around to the back, others dismounting in a circle. The one who came forward wore a blue Union jacket without sleeves, a bone choker at his throat, scars across his chest, and eyes the same hard black as the girl. He dismounted slow. Jonah didn't speak first. He knew better. The warrior came close enough for Jonah to smell the sweat on the man's skin, see the red war paint streaked like fangs down his cheeks. "She is here," the warrior said. Jonah nodded. "Found her near the creek. I gave her shelter." The man didn't blink. "You touch her." "No." "Who did?" Jonah hesitated. "Don't know, but she was running." The warrior studied him. Something passed between them then, not trust, but something older, stranger. A mutual recognition. Men who had seen war and survived. "I am her brother," the warrior said. "She is Kayubarhsa, not yours, not for any white man to keep." "I didn't keep her, just gave her a place to heal." The man looked past him toward the barn. "If she says you lie, I will cut your tongue and feed it to the hawk." Jonah nodded again. "Fair enough." The girl appeared then, silent as a ghost walking barefoot from the barn. She wore the same dress, cleaner now, and her hair had been combed back. Her eyes met her brother's. She did not speak, but lifted her hand, palm out. He held his breath. Jonah did too. Then the warrior turned, spoke something sharp in Comanche. A few of the others laughed, short, low. He mounted again. "She says you gave food, fire, nothing else." He paused. "You are not enemy, but she will not forget." Jonah watched as they rode off as fast as they had come. The girl did not look back. But she had not said goodbye either. He thought that would be the end of it, but it was. Not even close. The next night, the barn burned. Jonah saw it too late to stop it, flames high as the roof, horses screaming. He ran with a bucket, coughing smoke, but it was no good. The whole thing went up fast, faster than it should have. Kerosene, maybe, kindling piled in the corner. Not lightning. Not accident. When he found the boot prints around the ashes, small ones, pointed heel, he knew what they meant. Someone had followed the girl. Someone had wanted her dead, and someone else now wanted him dead, too. What he didn't know yet was why. The fire took more than the barn. It scorched the mule's flank, burned his stores, melted the hinges on his tool shed. The air stank of charred leather and singed oats. For a long while, Jonah stood in the ruin barefoot, his soles blistering on blackened dirt. He didn't move, didn't curse, just watched the flames eat what little he'd built. When dawn came, he found a strip of buckskin nailed to the cabin door. Tied to it was a length of braided hair, woman's, long, black, the end burned. A warning. He buried it beneath the old pecan tree. He sharpened his knives that night. The Comanche hadn't done this. He knew their kind of wrath, fast, open, bloody and bright as thunder. This was quieter, a grudge, not a war. He rode into town the next day. Red Branch was 20 miles east, nothing more than a crooked street and a saloon built over the remains of an old Spanish mission. He tied his horse near the blacksmith's forge and walked in slow. Men watched him from porches and windows. No one waved. Inside the saloon, a sour piano clinked half-heartedly. Smoke hung low. He ordered coffee, not whiskey. The barkeep raised a brow but said nothing. Jonah turned and leaned on the bar. A man in a cream suit sat at a back table, boots up, playing cards with himself. Thin as a reed, pale as paste, with silver rings on every finger. His name was Lyle Creed. Owned half the cattle north of the Brazos and a third of the girls in town. Jonah walked to his table. "I need names," Jonah said. Lyle didn't look up. "Do I look like a priest?" "Someone torched my barn. They were hunting a Comanche girl." That got a reaction. Lyle paused, laid down a card, ace of spades. A girl. Jonah nodded once. Lyle smiled, slow and venomous. "You sure she wasn't a ghost or a thief?" "She was running from something, you know what." Lyle leaned back. "Well now, that sounds like an accusation." "It's a fact." A silence fell like dust. Men behind Jonah stopped talking. The piano player left his bench. "I heard," Lyle said softly, "she was found near Miller's place last week. Heard she broke a man's face with a rock. He might have had some ideas about her. You know how things get when wild girls come this far east." Jonah didn't move. "Name." Lyle licked his teeth. "Don't have one." Jonah stepped back, slow, never taking his eyes off him. "Then pray you didn't light that match yourself." As he left, he felt every gaze dig into his back like a nail. He didn't go home, he rode north. Spent the night in the trees near the canyon where the buffalo trails cut deep into the red rock. He knew better than to sleep in the same place twice. It rained the next morning, not enough to soak the ashes, but enough to smear the boot prints he'd found before. Still, he traced what he could. The path circled west, toward Miller's spread. Old man Miller ran cattle and guns. He had 4 sons, all built like anvils and twice as sharp. The youngest, Wade, had a face like curdled milk and a streak of violence he didn't bother to hide. Jonah had seen him once carve a cow's eyelid just to prove something to a girl watching. Jonah didn't knock. He rode straight to the corral where Wade was roping calves and waited. Wade spotted him and smirked. Heard you took in a squaw, that true?" Jonah said nothing. Wade dropped the rope and walked close, reeking of sweat and sour beer. "Should have saved you the trouble, could have had your turn after me." Jonah didn't reach for his gun. He let Wade walk right into it. One punch, hard and fast, broke the boy's jaw and knocked 3 teeth loose. Jonah turned before the rest of the Millers could gather their guns. He rode hard and didn't stop until the river bent east. That night he camped in a cave he hadn't used in years. Inside he lit a small fire, just enough to see, and he waited. At dusk he heard the whistle. High, bird-like, a war whistle Comanche made. Jonah rose, hand on the knife at his belt. Then he saw her, just a shadow at first, then a shape, the girl from the barn. She stepped into the light, soaked and silent, eyes rimmed with firelight. "I thought they took you back," he said. She knelt beside the fire, warming her fingers. "They did. Why are you here?" She reached into her tunic and laid something on the dirt. A belt buckle, blood-stained, carved with the initials W.M. Wade Miller. Jonah stared at it. She watched him. "They followed me," she said. Her voice was raw, low. "I let them." Jonah felt something deep in his chest shift. A slow, cold realization. She hadn't been running. She had been drawing them out. He looked at her again, and this time saw her for what she truly was. Not a victim. Not a ghost. A blade in flesh. A girl made of vengeance. The rain kept falling. By morning, the river ran thick with mud, the banks swollen and red-veined. Jonah stood beside the girl at the cave mouth, eyes on the water. She hadn't spoken again, not through the night, not even when he offered half his jerky at dawn. She'd taken it, chewing slow, watching the trees across the bank like something might crawl out of them. He didn't know her name still, but she had told him something with that belt buckle. She had killed Wade Miller, likely with her own hands, maybe a knife, maybe a rock like before. Jonah didn't ask for the story. Some truths were too sacred to speak aloud. "We can't stay here," he said. She looked at him. Her mouth was a hard line. "They'll come hunting again," he said. "Your brother might not know it yet, but they'll blame him, and you for Wade." She tilted her head, curious. Would that be wrong? "No," Jonah said, "but wrong don't matter out here. Only power." She nodded once. He noticed how she carried herself now, shoulders squared, weight on the balls of her feet. She had stopped being afraid. That terrified him more than her silence. They rode west, keeping to the old trading trails where brush grew tall and the rocks broke the sightlines. Jonah knew these paths like scars. He tracked deserters through this country during the war. He remembered where the creeks bent, where the grass whispered trouble, where the vultures circled long before anything died. They reached a limestone ridge near dusk. Below it, the land opened like a wound, an old Spanish mission in ruins, stone walls tumbled and half buried in sand. He had slept there once years back when his hand was still bandaged and his horse near dead. No one came near it now. Locals said it was haunted. He hoped they were right. They made camp inside the nave under a shattered crossbeam. Wind hissed through broken, stained glass. The girl crouched to gather wood. Jonah built the fire. Neither spoke. Trust was a brittle thing, and they were still testing its weight. That night, she showed him her scars. Not on purpose. She pulled her blanket back to sleep, and her shoulders slipped bare in the firelight. The burn there was old rope or iron, he couldn't tell. Another one on her side, shaped like a boot heel. Jonah looked once, then looked away. In the morning, she was gone. He rose with the sun, heart thudding cold in his chest. Her blanket lay folded, untouched. Tracks led out of the mission, light and fast. He saddled the horse, cursing himself, and followed. He found her near a dry creek, kneeling beside something he couldn't see. As he approached, she stood, stiff and strange. Blood darkened her thighs. A dead jackrabbit lay by her feet, throat slit. She held a blade carved from obsidian. "You're bleeding," Jonah said. She said nothing, just turned and walked past him, back toward the horse. Jonah looked down at the rabbit. It hadn't been killed for food. It had been part of a rite. He didn't ask what kind. She wouldn't have told him anyway. They rode 3 more days without seeing another soul, but the girl had changed. Her silence deepened. She began marking trees as they passed, small notches, shaped like crescent moons. Jonah recognized the signs. She was laying a trail. Not for escape. For war. By the time they reached the mesa where the vultures bred, Jonah spotted the first rider. A shadow on the far ridge, watching, then gone. At night, more signs, footprints that hadn't been there before. A deer carcass nailed to a tree, gutted and arranged like a warning. Jonah knew what it meant. The Millers weren't finished. But something else had shifted too. The Comanche were moving again. He saw it in the smoke columns on the horizon, in the quiet trails, in the way the girl touched the earth before sleeping, whispering words he didn't understand. On the 5th night, she spoke again. "They took me near Sweetwater." He looked at her across the fire. Her face was in shadow. "I was gathering willow bark with my cousin. They shot her in the back. She fell into the river." Jonah said nothing. "They kept me 3 nights. I counted. Wade tried to burn my tongue so I wouldn't speak their names." She touched her throat. I bit his lip off. Jonah stared at the fire. The wood cracked and hissed. "My brother found me on the 4th day, but not before I killed the one who held me last. I didn't let them finish their game." She looked at him then. "You sheltered me, you didn't touch me. That's why you're still breathing." He nodded. She smiled, not with her mouth, but with her eyes, like she'd just decided something. "We go back now," she said. Jonah's gut clenched. "You sure?" She stood, walked to the saddle, and lifted a bundle he hadn't seen before. Inside were feathers, bones, beads, 2 scalps dried and cured. She tied one to her belt. "I don't run anymore," she said. Neither did he. They returned to fire. The plains around Red Branch lit up in the night, not from lightning or stars, but from torches and burning fields. The Millers had begun clearing out the edges, cabins, squatters, half-built shanties. Anyone without a badge or a bloodline got flushed into the brush. Jonah and the girl watched from a ridge as smoke smeared the sky. Down below, the town huddled tighter than it ever had, guns on porches, men standing too deep in the saloon with their mouths dry and fingers twitching. "What are they afraid of?" Jonah asked. The girl didn't look away from the flames. "Me." They didn't ride into Red Branch. They flanked it west, crossed under the river bridge, and came upon a camp hidden in the cottonwoods, 30 warriors, her brother among them. They had pitched no fires, left no horses tethered. Everything about the place said one thing: they were ready. Her brother rose as she approached. He didn't smile, didn't speak, just lifted a hand and touched her shoulder. Then he turned to Jonah. "You came back," he said. "She's not done," Jonah replied. The brother nodded. "Neither are we." That night plans were drawn, not on paper, but in dust. Lines carved with knives, tokens marked with stones. Jonah understood some of it. The rest was old tongue, old ways. The Comanche didn't speak of vengeance. They enacted it. By dawn, the girl had painted her face. 2 black lines down her cheeks, a red smear across her eyes. Her braids were tight and her knife oiled. Jonah watched as she tied her tunic with a strip of rawhide, then slid a tomahawk into the band at her back. She glanced at him. You ride with me. He nodded. I reckon I do. They split into 3 groups. Jonah rode with her and her brother down the south trail, keeping to the dry gulch that led straight behind the Miller ranch. 24 Comanche ghosted between the rocks and shrubs, silent as snowfall. The Millers had fortified their land since Wade went missing. A watchtower, sandbags, 4 men with rifles posted by the barn. Didn't matter. The girl moved first. She climbed a bluff near the tower, pulled an arrow from her quiver, and set it to a bow Jonah hadn't seen until that moment, short, recurved, horn-backed. 1 shot. The sentry dropped without a sound. Then it began. Screams. Not of fear, of surprise. The kind of sound that comes when a man expects to rule the land and finds it taken from beneath him. Jonah rode down with her, gun drawn, watching shapes fall. Her brother moved like smoke, over fences, into the barn, knife flashing. Jonah found the second Miller's son trying to mount a horse. He shot the man through the hip. The boy fell, crawled, mouth gaping. Please, he said. Jonah walked past him, didn't need to see the face, didn't care. The girl found the oldest Miller, Josiah, behind the root cellar. He had a shotgun. She didn't flinch, just stepped in close. He pulled the trigger. Nothing, empty. She slit his throat from chin to ear. The last one, the father, was found in the granary, locked in with 2 rifles, 3 crates of ammunition, and his dead wife's Bible. Jonah kicked the door in. The old man raised his gun. The girl stepped into his shot, unflinching. He froze, lowered the barrel. You're her, he whispered. She walked toward him. He fell back, stumbled over grain sacks. I didn't know, he said. I didn't Wade. He did it, not me. She stared. You didn't stop him. He looked at Jonah. Please. Jonah said nothing. She pulled her tomahawk, 1 swing. It sank deep into his chest, cracked ribs, struck lung. When it was done, she walked back out, face clean, blade dripping. No one else came. The place was empty now. The warriors didn't stay. They left with the night back into the hills, leaving the ranch to rot. No fire, no flag, no trophies. Just silence. She stood beside Jonah as the sun rose. Do you regret it? He asked. She didn't answer for a long time. Then I remember every face. He turned to her. I don't regret, she said. I remember. He nodded. They rode back toward the canyon. But she didn't stop. Not yet. They kept riding west, beyond the broken fence lines, beyond the grazing lands and cattle bones, beyond even where the old maps dared to mark the rivers. The earth changed out there, grew crueler, grew true. Each night they camped under stars like cold eyes, and each night Jonah watched the girl draw new signs in the dirt, shapes that spiraled and crossed, crescent notches and jagged teeth. She never explained them. They weren't for him. They passed through a gulch where the rocks bled iron, past an abandoned church filled with birds, past a wagon wreck picked clean by wolves. She marked nothing of it, just kept riding. Jonah knew what it meant. She had blood yet to reckon. 3 days past the last fire, they crossed the tracks of a lone rider, deep gouged, freshly made, wagon wheels beside it, northbound. They followed. He didn't ask who it was. He already knew. Lyle Creed. The man hadn't run to hide. He'd run to wait. Jonah had seen men like him before, the kind that thrived in chaos, sold memory like cattle, always smiling, always watching for the next vein to bleed. They found his camp by the edge of a dry lake, a green tent, 2 guards, and a crate of rifles stacked under a tarpaulin. He was seated in a chair like a preacher at the gallows, reading from a leather-bound book with gold trim. Jonah stayed back. The girl walked in alone. The guards raised their guns. Lyle lifted a hand. "Let her come," he said. She stopped 10 feet from him. "Well," Lyle said, closing the book, "you grew teeth." She didn't respond. He studied her. "You think this ends with me? I didn't touch you, girl. I didn't pay to see it. I just knew it was happening. There's a difference." She stared. "You want a name?" he asked. "What would you do with a dozen? There are more like them, everywhere. They move town to town. One girl won't change that." She pulled something from her belt. The burned braid, the one that had been nailed to Jonah's door. She tossed it at Lyle's feet. "That's not mine," he said. She pulled her bow. "Oh, wait." He never finished the word. The arrow punched through his throat. He gurgled once. The book fell into the dirt, splotched with blood. The guards didn't run. They just lowered their rifles, slow, almost respectful. They had seen something they would never forget. The girl turned. Jonah met her as she walked past. She looked tired, not weak, not broken, just tired in a way that goes all the way to the bone. They buried Lyle Creed in the lake bed. No marker, no prayer. Afterward, Jonah sat beside her in the dust. "You done?" he asked. She looked at the horizon. "They're never all gone." He nodded. "But I'm finished," she said. He didn't ask what she meant. It wasn't his place. At dawn, she packed her things and saddled the horse. She mounted without help. "I'll go south," she said. "Find the old trails, maybe the Rio Grande." "You'll be hunted." "Let them." Jonah stepped back. She offered him a look, not thanks, not farewell, just a moment of stillness, the kind between a last breath and the next. Then she rode off, her shadow long against the stone. He never saw her again. But months later, stories came through the trade routes, of ranchers found dead in their beds, of girls gone missing, then returned, of Comanche riders seen moving swift through the dark. Some said a ghost led them, a girl with war paint and a knife of glass. Jonah didn't tell them what he knew. He kept to his cabin, rebuilt the barn, lived quiet. But every time he saw fire on the horizon, he stood and watched. And he remembered.